My husband lied about a business trip. Turns out, he was fulfilling his dying ex's final wish. Now he has 48 hours to come home, or lose everything. For a bit of background, my husband, Nolan, he's 33 now, and I, 30, have been married for 2 years. We first got together almost 4 years ago after being introduced by some mutual college friends. Funny enough, we actually went to the same school, but he was a senior in a completely different department, so our paths didn't really cross back then. At the time, he was also in a long-term relationship, so there wasn't much room for interaction beyond the occasional group hangout. I did like him, but he wasn't available, and we weren't close enough for me to ever consider making a move. Nolan and his ex, Sophie, had been together since middle school, and back in college, they were the kind of couple everyone just assumed would end up married. They had that soulmate kind of energy, at least, that's how it seemed from the outside. After Nolan graduated, I didn't hear anything about him for a while. A couple of years passed, and then, about 7 years ago, word got around that he and Sophie had broken up. It was big news among our old classmates because, for as long as anyone could remember, they had been planning a future together. I had honestly just assumed they were already married by then. No one knew for sure why they split, but there were plenty of rumors. Some people swore Sophie had cheated, while others believed Nolan was the one who had been unfaithful. Another common theory was that Sophie had left him for better career prospects, moving away and trying to make a long-distance relationship work before they ultimately called it quits. Whatever the truth was, neither of them ever spoke about it publicly, so all we had to go on were whispers and speculation. 3 years after their breakup, a couple of my friends mentioned that Nolan was finally ready to start dating again. He'd had enough of casual flings and wanted something real. As it happened, I was newly single myself, fresh out of a brief 3-month relationship, and my friends thought it might be a good idea for us to give it a shot. They knew I'd liked Nolan back in college but never acted on it because of Sophie, so when they suggested setting us up, I figured, why not? We went on our first date, and honestly, it went better than I could have hoped. From that point on, we just kept moving forward, and it felt effortless. Of course, I was curious about what had really happened between him and Sophie, but I didn't want to bring it up too soon. I waited until we'd been together for 3 months before finally asking him about it, knowing it was probably a touchy subject. That's when he confirmed one of the rumors. Sophie had moved to New York to pursue her career. She was focused on environmental law, and the best opportunities for her were out of state. They tried long distance for about a year, but it became clear that it wasn't working. Nolan had no desire to leave his hometown. His job, family, and friends were all here. At the same time, he didn't think it was fair to ask Sophie to give up everything she was working toward just to come back to him. After a lot of painful conversations, they made the mutual decision to go their separate ways. They attempted to stay friends at first, even planning to visit each other during the holidays, but it quickly became obvious that it wasn't going to work. There were still feelings between them, and staying in touch only made things harder. So, as difficult as it was, they cut ties completely. Nolan got emotional when he told me about it, actually cried, which told me just how much it had meant to him. After that, he didn't date for almost 2 years. He needed time to heal and figure out who he was outside of that relationship. But when he finally did start seeing people again, he found himself caught in a cycle of meaningless flings with women who weren't looking for anything serious. That just wasn't him. When he mentioned this struggle to our mutual friends, they thought of me and decided to set us up. From the start, he was upfront about wanting something real, and when he told me he genuinely liked me and wanted to see where things could go, I was thrilled. After that one conversation about Sophie, I never really brought her up again. I could tell it was still a sore spot, and I wasn't about to poke at an old wound. It would take time for him to fully move on, but I was okay with that. I loved him, and I believed he was with me because he wanted to be, not because he was stuck in the past. At least, that's what I thought at the time. The last 4 years have been incredible, 2 years of dating followed by 2 years of marriage. We've always been honest with each other, and while no relationship is perfect, we never faced anything too serious. That's why I never imagined he would lie to me. I had always been certain that once he and Sophie ended things, they cut each other off completely. Now, I'm starting to wonder if I was wrong. I never had a single insecurity about Sophie because Nolan barely ever mentioned her. On the rare occasions he did, it was usually just in passing, part of some childhood story or a memory from his past. And when he talked about her, there was never any emotion behind it, nothing that made me think he still had feelings for her. I also knew that their breakup had been a painful subject, so I never pried or pushed him to talk about it. Besides, I had no reason to believe he wasn't over her. He was the one who proposed to me. After all, if he had any lingering feelings for his ex, why would he have asked me to marry him? Looking back now, I realized there weren't any warning signs. Nothing that could have possibly prepared me for this. Anyway, here's what happened. A few days ago, Nolan told me he needed to take a short trip to New York. According to him, one of his former co-workers had started a business and offered him a job, so he wanted to check it out and see if it was a good fit. I thought it was a great idea. He'd been unemployed for the past few months, and honestly, I was starting to worry about him. 3 months ago, he quit his job, saying he was completely burned out and needed a change. That had caught me off guard because he'd always talked about how much he loved working there. He got along well with his colleagues, his boss valued him, and he had even been in line for a promotion. But when I brought that up, he just shrugged it off, saying he was tired of doing the same thing every day and that a promotion would only trap him further. He wanted to explore other opportunities before it was too late. I figured he was just having some sort of early midlife crisis, but I didn't argue. Financially, we were fine. I made enough to support both of us, so I told him he could take a break for a couple of months and figure things out. Even though, at his age, it felt a little late to be doing that. But I bit my tongue because I wanted to be supportive. The problem was, for 3 whole months, he did absolutely nothing. Every day, I'd come home from work and find him planted on the couch, watching some random movie or TV show. He kept saying he was looking into new business opportunities, but I never actually saw him take any steps in that direction. I tried to encourage him, to gently nudge him into doing something, but he always told me not to rush him, that he just needed time. I wanted to be patient, to let him work through whatever he was going through, but my patience was wearing thin. So, when he told me about this potential job in New York, I was thrilled. It felt like progress, like maybe he was finally ready to get back on track. I was so relieved that I didn't even think about Sophie. I completely forgot that she lived in New York. I even paid for his plane ticket myself, which, in hindsight, makes me feel like a complete idiot. But here's where it all unraveled. Nolan had been using my laptop occasionally since he no longer had his work-issued one and had never bothered buying a personal one. A couple of days ago, the morning of his flight, he used my laptop for something but forgot to switch accounts when he was done. Later, when I opened my email app, I noticed I was still logged into his account. I was about to switch back to mine when something caught my eye. The most recent email was from Sophie. My stomach dropped. I clicked on it, and my worst fear was confirmed. She had written that she couldn't wait to see him and that she'd be at the airport waiting for him when he landed. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. I didn't know what to do or how to process it. But as the shock started to wear off, I did the only thing I could. I scrolled back through the rest of their emails. That's when I saw how it all started. About 3 months ago, right around the time Nolan quit his job, Sophie had reached out to him. She told him she had been diagnosed with lung cancer a couple of years ago, and things weren't looking good. The chemo wasn't working, and the cancer had spread. She had tried to keep it from everyone because she didn't want people worrying about her, but now that her condition had worsened, she wasn't sure how much time she had left. Before it was too late, she wanted to make things right with Nolan. And apparently, he wanted to make things right with her, too. That first email from Sophie had been sent just a few weeks before Nolan quit his job, right around the time his mood began to shift. In it, she told him that she couldn't travel to see him, but she wanted him to come to her, just once, before it was too late, so they could make peace with each other. She acknowledged that he was married and admitted that I probably wouldn't approve. But even then, she asked him to come up with some excuse and visit her anyway because it was her final wish. At first, he hadn't responded. Weeks went by with no reply from him. But then, about a month ago, he finally wrote back. He told her that he would come, that he just needed time to get everything in order. From there, their emails continued. They weren't love letters or anything overtly romantic, but they were still enough to sting. They talked about their lives, about how much they had changed, and about how they missed talking to each other. That was the part that got to me, not that they were professing undying love, but the fact that he had kept this from me. That he had lied. It felt like a betrayal, plain and simple. I had trusted him completely. I had encouraged him to take this trip. I had even paid for his flight, believing that I was supporting him in finding a new job. And all the while, he had been sneaking around behind my back, planning this secret trip to see his ex. If he had just told me the truth, if he had sat me down and explained that Sophie was sick and that he wanted to see her one last time, I might have struggled with it at first, but I would have understood. I wouldn't have held it against him. At one point, she had been a huge part of his life. They were once engaged, planning a future together. I knew that history doesn't just disappear. I might not have liked it, but I would have respected him for being honest. But instead, he chose to lie. And that was unforgivable. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. His decision to quit his job, his constant state of depression, his complete lack of motivation, it had all been because of Sophie. While I was working overtime to keep our life together, he was sitting around, mourning his ex. I had been patient, understanding, and supportive, and in return, he had completely disregarded me. I was furious. I wasn't about to let this go. By the time I read those emails, I knew his flight had already landed. I didn't waste any time. I picked up my phone and called him. A part of me expected him to ignore my call, but to my surprise, he answered. I figured he was trying to play it cool, to make sure I didn't suspect anything. Keeping my voice as steady as possible, I asked him where he was and if his flight had landed safely. He responded with ease, telling me that everything went smoothly, and that he was just about to meet his coworker for lunch and drinks. After that, he said, he'd give me an update on how the meeting went. He was lying so effortlessly, pretending as if everything was completely normal. I gave him one last chance. I asked him if there was anything he wanted to tell me. A perfect opening for him to confess, to come clean and explain himself. But instead, he doubled down. He scoffed, acted confused, and told me that everything was fine, that I was being paranoid for no reason. That was it. I wasn't going to sit there and let him gaslight me. I told him that I had seen his emails. That I knew exactly where he was and what he was doing. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, without a single word, he hung up. No explanation. No attempt to defend himself. Just a dead phone line. I called him again. And again. For 10, maybe 15 minutes, I kept trying. But he refused to pick up. Eventually, his phone went straight to voicemail. He had turned it off. I didn't know what he was doing, but I did know one thing: he was panicking. And that only pissed me off more. So, I sent him a message. I told him he had exactly 2 days to come back and give me a damn good reason, if he could even come up with one. If not, everything he owned would be out on the curb. Including him. There was no way I was going to let a liar and a cheat continue living with me. That much was certain. I gave him those 2 days because, deep down, some part of me still clung to the hope that he had a reasonable explanation for all of this. But now, I'm not so sure anymore. Because it's been 3 days. 3 days since that phone call, and things haven't been sorted out. If anything, they've only gotten worse. Now, somehow, all our friends are involved. Apparently, they knew all along. They had known about Sophie, about his plans to see her, about everything, and yet, not a single one of them had told me. They had all chosen to keep it a secret from me. That betrayal cut even deeper. I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know how to feel. After I sent that message, he didn't respond for hours. But then, late that night, he finally called me back. I answered. He told me he had kept it a secret because he knew I wouldn't understand. That Sophie had been suffering for a long time, but she hadn't told him until the very end. He said he had to make these moments count because they weren't sure how much time she had left, and she had asked, no, begged, for him to come see her one last time. He told me that he didn't want to taint their final meeting by fighting with me or making me upset. That all he wanted was to have good memories of their last moments together. That's why he lied. That's why he never told me the truth about going to New York. He admitted that he should have been honest about why he quit his job. That it had nothing to do with his so-called burnout or needing a career change. He left because he was falling apart over Sophie. Even after all these years, despite everything that had happened, he still cared for her. He couldn't accept that she wouldn't be around much longer. He told me that our mutual friends had known all along, but he had made them swear not to tell me. He didn't want me to worry. He didn't want me to feel insecure. And unfortunately, I had to find out in the worst way possible. He swore he had planned to tell me after he got back. But, as luck would have it, he forgot to log out of his email. I told him that none of that mattered. Because at the end of the day, he still lied. He still betrayed me. I stood by what I had said. He had 2 days to come back. He wasn't going to spend a whole week there like he originally planned. But he refused. He told me it wasn't possible. Sophie wanted him there, and he couldn't bring himself to leave her, not when she was so weak, so fragile, so close to the end. She had her family, but not many friends. He was one of the few people she could truly lean on. And according to him, I was asking too much. Our friends think the same. They keep telling me I should let him stay. That this is her dying wish, and I should have the decency to let him fulfill it. That after this, they'll never see each other again, so why am I making this ugly? They all insist that this is just friendship. That it's completely platonic. That I have nothing to be insecure about. And I don't know how to feel. They're making me seem like the bad guy for being hurt. Even Nolan keeps saying that I'm being heartless for demanding he come back, that I'm being cruel for giving him a deadline. But is that really too much to ask? I'm confused. I'm hurt.
And I don't know if I'm the one being unreasonable. Update 1. I've been going through the comments, and most of you think I should leave him. That I shouldn't even give him a chance. But I love him.
I don't know if leaving him is the right choice, not yet. Regardless of what he's done, I still want to talk to him one last time and clear the air between us. So, I gave him an ultimatum. I told him he has one last chance to explain himself. But for that, he has to get on the next available flight home. I already checked the schedules and sent him the exact flight he needs to take. If he doesn't get on that plane and come back today, it's over. I will never speak to him again. And I will file for divorce immediately. I made it clear to Nolan there was no way he was going to talk to our friends and get them to change my mind.
My decision was final. No one could sway me.
I sent him that message hours ago, and he still hasn't responded.
The flight I told him to take leaves in 2 hours. I feel sick just thinking about what he's going to decide. But deep down, I already know. I have a bad feeling about this. At this point, I've given up hope.
I blocked all of our so-called friends who tried to convince me that Nolan wasn't in the wrong. If they truly cared about me, they never would have tried to manipulate me like that. It's clear now they were always Nolan's friends first.
Never mine.
And honestly, even that's questionable because I don't think real friends would stand by and watch someone betray their spouse like this. At least with Nolan, I can consider forgiving him, because he was my husband.
There was something there to fight for. But my friends? No chance. I can't forgive them. I will never trust them again. And if Nolan doesn't come back today, the same goes for him. I've already spoken to my lawyer.
Now, I'm just waiting to see how this plays out.
Update 2. I just got a message from Nolan. The flight he was supposed to take home took off hours ago. And I didn't hear a word from him.
Then, half an hour after the flight had left, he finally texted me. He told me he wasn't coming back today. That he was really sorry, but he had decided to stay with Sophie for the whole week. That I could believe whatever I wanted, but right now, his priority was his dying friend, not me.
And if I couldn't understand that, then I was just heartless. So, that's it.
He's turning this around on me.
Trying to make me out to be the bad guy. As if I'm the one who did something wrong. As if I'm the one who lied. Well, two can play that game.
I called my lawyer immediately and gave him the green light to proceed with the divorce. The petition will be filed first thing tomorrow morning.
This marriage is over. I won't lie, it hurts. I never saw any of this coming. But at the same time, I know I'm making the right choice. Nolan is the one who's losing the most here. I doubt any court or mediator is going to have sympathy for him.
His friends and family might, but that's about it. Because when I talked to my parents and a few of my real friends, they all stood by me.
They see him for what he is.
And judging by what so many of you in the comments have said, any reasonable person would agree. I've already started packing his things, boxing everything up so I can leave it on the curb just like I promised. Because no matter what, he is never setting foot in this house again.
And I'll make sure of that. Update 3. I don't think Nolan is coming back anymore.
A couple of days ago, he showed up at the house.
Found all his stuff sitting outside on the curb. Lucky for him, nothing got stolen.
But instead of quietly collecting his things and leaving, he had the audacity to come to the door and start screaming at me.
I didn't even bother opening it.
I just told him through the door if he didn't leave, I'd call the cops.
This house belongs to me. I don't want him here. He's officially out of my life. And you know what he said? That he was fine with it.
That he had no intention of living with me anyway because I was a heartless, emotionless piece of work and he regretted ever marrying me. Then, the final blow, he said he was going back to Sophie. That he wanted to be with someone he actually loved.
Someone who loved him back. And that's when it hit me. He never let her go.
I wasted 4 years of my life on this man.
But you know what? I'm over it.
The divorce is already in motion. He made it clear he's in love with Sophie, so I doubt he'll contest it. He'll probably try to wrap this up as quickly as possible.
And that's fine with me. I just want to move on. From now on, my only focus is on myself. I'm done holding on to people who don't deserve me.
I'm done keeping in touch with anyone who's hurt me.
I'm done with all of it. Time to start over.